So, Tom, I thought we'd start today. You penned a column for CTV discussing Pierre Poilievre. I just want to read the first line. We'll jump in from there. You wrote, Pierre Poilievre seems to have discovered the charm of saying one thing and its opposite in successive interviews. What are we talking about here?
Well, he doesn't give a lot of interviews, but he's given two substantive French interviews to my friend and colleague Emmanuel Latraverse on one of the panel shows that I do on the French side. And I linked to them in that CTV story so people can follow it. In December, his end-of-year interview with Emmanuel Latraverse was clear as a bell when he was asked a straight-up question, what about social programs? Word for word, I'm going to keep all social programs. I won't be cutting social programs. And I've congratulated him for that many times since, saying, look, because I've always known that social programs are a great way to remove inequality in our society. And I thought Poilievre was so clear, so straight in his answer, so transparent. I said, well, this is somebody who, he's not talking with a forked tongue. 3 months later, last Friday, the 22nd of March, he gives another interview to the same Emmanuel Latraverse on the same show. By the way, this is a panel show where the panels change from show to show, but I happened to be on both Poilievre shows. That's why I caught it. And Emmanuel asks him again about social programs, and you should have seen him. It's not just the Canadian couple that won the figure skating crown recently. I think that Poilievre's in the competition for the best figure skater because he was doing circles all over the ice, wouldn't answer the question. I think he's actually a multi-sport athlete because he started doing the back crawl at one point. He would not answer, and he was using weasel words like, well, generally we'll try this, and, generally we'll respect provincial jurisdiction. Obviously, he'd gone too far in his answer before Christmas. Some of his advisors say, boss, they're going to play that back for you many times if you start chopping social programs. How could Pierre Poilievre promise that he's going to balance the budget, make your groceries cheaper, build a house for you, take care of crime in the streets, and take care of all the other things he says he's going to do, and not cut anything in the government? It's just not plausible. Everybody knows it's not plausible. Even he knows it's not plausible, but he was trying to say it and get away with it. So this is one of the things I'm noticing with Poilievre. He'll say something and it's opposite. If you ask him, even under torture, are you a climate change denier? He'll deny that he's a climate change denier. But when you say you don't have to do anything to fight climate change, of course you're denying that climate change is a real problem because you're refusing to be a responsible politician, somebody seeking the highest office in the country and saying, yeah, we're going to do our share in Canada. So this is pure Poilievre, and this is, I think, one of the better examples we've seen recently.
By the way, I'd like to go back to your comment about even under torture, which I thought was kind of interesting. Okay, something to consider.
It was metaphorical, of course.
Next up, this International Trademark Association, part of Bill 96. We were talking to Jean-François Lisée yesterday and got into it a little bit over this idea. And he brought up Canadian Tire as one of the suggestions that I said, well, what are you going to call it? Pneu Canadien. He said, first of all, they don't sell just tires. And secondly, the tires they sell are not necessarily made in Canada. In other words, implying it was a really dumb name for a store. I wonder, though, because you have instances, Tom, and there are plenty around us. It's Shoppers Drug Mart everywhere else in Canada. It's Pharmaprix. It's the same chain in Quebec. There are others, Sleep Country in Ontario and everywhere else, Dormez-vous in Quebec. Is this idea really that far-fetched?
Well, Bill 96 is completely bonkers on this because it doesn't say that you have to change it to Pneu Canadien. That was settled in 1977 with Bill 101. But now what they're saying, so Bill 101, let's go all the way back to Bill 101. Here's what it said. It said that as long as the generic part of your raison sociale, your firm name and style, is in French, the specific part can be in any other language, let's just say English. So if you have a restaurant, of course it works in both languages, but you have something called Le Restaurant, the Dancing Gypsy, that's always been allowed. But you'd have to have the word Le Restaurant. Mm-hmm. Canadian Tire, Costco Wholesale, en gros, those are things that have their name on both sides. It's both the generic and the specific. This is enough of a name for you to know who we are. La Baie, the Bay. They translated it. Now they're saying you're going to have to add another sign where you give the generic part. So think of a kids' clothing store like Old Navy. You'd have to say Les Vêtements Old Navy because, of course, people can't look in the window and see that, oh, those are clothes. Old Navy is a clothes store. No, you're going to have to put up a sign saying that and spend a lot of money. And by the way, Old Navy is a French company from France because in France, they really love English names for all of the companies and all of the stores. So this is the type of nonsense, change that was absolutely unnecessary that reminds me of one thing. It reminds me of Pastigate. Now, how did I get from firm names to Pastigate? When, back in the 80s, they came up, they rejigged the rules from Bill 101 with regard to what you could say in English or another language and then in French on a menu and all that. We laughed at it because the definition was so arcane. You know, if the food substance is at least as common in Quebec as it is in the country of origin, then it's not considered an authentic ethnic dish, and therefore it has to be in French. So once they put in that, I said, okay, this is going to one day wind up being litigated and laughed at. And that gave us Pastigate. It's the same thing here. By the way, most of these big companies are just going to challenge it because the head of the largest, very real association that deals with these intellectual property issues has said, you know, by the way, you're just going to have a whole bunch of products that are no longer sold in Quebec. We already had that a few weeks ago from the largest appliance manufacturers saying, well, we're just not going to sell our stuff in Quebec anymore. And so the big loser, of course, is going to be Quebecers because once you have less competition, you have higher prices. But these ideas, as I was saying before, they've been on the shelf of overzealous bureaucrats for decades. Every sensible minister, be they liberal or Péquiste, has always said, okay, take that idea and shove it. It's really dumb because you haven't thought this through. Until the CAC came along and they said, this is great. We're looking to shore up our credentials on the nationalist side. We'll take everything that's been in your bottom drawer for decades that makes no sense whatsoever, and we're going to make it into law, and we're going to call it Bill 96. That's where we are right now in the province of Quebec.
So I will point out, with respect to trademarks, right, and the International Trademark Association came out and said basically, well, you just summarized now, this is going to cause higher prices. Some manufacturers will want to stop. When I brought that up, Jean-François Lisée used the argument or used the comparison. Remember when we said that movies would have to be released in French on the same day they were released in English in Quebec. And Jacques Valenti, who was then head of the Motion Picture Association of America, said, never going to happen. You're going to lose your chance to see Star Wars. And in fact, it happened and it works and it's still operating now.
Yeah, and so that is something that separatists like Jean-François have been repeating for the past couple of months, saying we've got to stand our ground. But I have to say that most of the people who talk about this have never read the absurdity of what's actually written into Bill 96. So it's one thing to say that when you release a movie, you're going to have the French translation, which eventually won the day. And despite the reticence, you give the example of Jacques Valenti, totally true story. And they were right to hold their ground here in Quebec, saying, no, we want to make sure that the movies are available in French. Good idea. They were right to stick to their guns. Here, this is nonsense. This is bonkers. This has nothing to do with helping people get something in their language. Adding a word, like what do you add above a Canadian Tire? Les magasins? Oh, I didn't know this was a store. Let's put up a big sign that costs $100,000 across the whole top of the roof to say, yeah, Les magasins Canadian Tire. This is the aspect of Bill 96 that nobody saw through. You know, Eric Meldau's done an outstanding job talking regularly about what Bill 96 has meant for the bilingual, i.e. the ones where you can get service in English, health and social service institutions. Everybody just shrugged their shoulders and said, well, the government says there's no problem, that they've still got guarantees that they haven't taken away. No, it's going to be almost impossible to require a knowledge of English to hire people into those institutions that are supposed to be able to provide service in English. And this is the type of thing, it's detailed. When the minute you have a 5-minute conversation about what something actually says, people just yawn and move on. But in the real world, what's going to happen is there will be products that will not be imported here, whether they're big products like appliances or whether they're small things where people just aren't going to change everything that they have intellectual property in. They're not going to start changing it.
I will, and again, and we're going to have to wrap up. When I brought that up, because that's the argument, right? They're simply just not coming to this market. It doesn't make sense for those manufacturers. And the answer from the other side, from Jean-François Lisée, was, well, every manufacturer, every business wants to increase reach. And if they choose some manufacturers not to sell here because of that change, others will fill that void because they'll spend the extra money. This is a market of 9 million people, and it makes sense for someone else to step in. Competition will win the day.
And there'll be less competition, and the prices will go up. And I'll just give the example of one appliance that we bought recently. We bought a new microwave, and there was a simple plaque that you could stick on over all the buttons that was in French. You just take off the wrapper, and what was in English all of a sudden became French.
Yeah.
That's not good enough. It's going to have to be embossed on the stove or the fridge or anything that says on off that's embossed. That has to be done in French. That means a whole different production line. And that's why the biggest manufacturers of appliances are just saying, That's crazy. We're willing to accommodate, but if somebody's really going to lose sleep and we're going to lose market because of on-off, either A, they'll fight it and they'll win, or B, they'll just say, we'll take a pass. Good luck with the third-rate stuff that you're going to be getting from somebody who's willing to play along.
I got one last question. In France, when they have their switches, do their switches say on-off or not?
No, they're usually red and blue and green, and you're supposed to know from the color coding what they are because they're sold into Germany and Holland and France and Italy at the same time. So it's actually quite rare that there's anything written on it.
And here we go. All right, Tom, thank you. Appreciate it.